Howdy, howdy. So let's get started here. So last week, last Friday, we were on chapter 1, text number 9, going over how the Arisha Dwargas are an obstacle to experiencing or achieving bhakti. We discussed last Thursday the first of the 6 enemies, the first of the 6 Arisha Dwargas, and that is kama, or lust. So the 6 Arisha Dwargas are kam, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, and matsarya. Kam is lust, krodha, anger, lobha, greed, moha, illusion, madha, arrogance, and matsarya, envy. So today we're going to spend the next 20 minutes or so understanding the second of these 6, and that is anger. There's a nice story. Lord Brahma, the creator of the material universe, he was in the process of, it was the dawn of creation, he was in the process of manifesting, creating the material universe. And he was having children to help him in managing and creating this new universe. He had a poor track record, to be honest. Many of his kids, and when Brahma had kids, he was obviously a perfected being. So he could have children merely by thinking about children. So he would have these, what were called mind-born, born of his mind-born children. And these mind-born children, obviously being the son of a perfect entity, Lord Brahma, they would go off and they would rather engage in acts of spiritual development. And they had no desire, had no interest in being engaged by their father in the family business of creating the universe, of managing the universe. So this was happening time and time again. Lord Brahma would have a mind-born child, and this child would say, "I'm sorry, Dad, I'm not interested in the family business." And off they go, and they join the local convent. Still, the management of the universe must go on, right? This has to happen. So again, he creates 4 children, the 4 Kumaras. And these 4 Kumaras, born from his mind, they immediately upon their birth were born with enormous spiritual energy, mystic power. And they immediately came to the conclusion that they had no desire to get involved in universal management, getting married, procreating, to fill the world with the various species of life. No interest in this whatsoever, these 4 boys. And Lord Brahma said, "Look, kids, you have got to help me create, manage, and indeed populate this universe. I can't have you going off, joining a local ashram, a local convent. You've got to do what your father says. Your father's giving you an instruction. You have to follow the instructions of your dad." And these 4 boys, now they had mystical yogic power already from birth. And they were able to choose not to grow up. They literally kept themselves in the bodies of 5-year-old boys. That's actually why they're called Kumar. Kumar means child, right? sometimes say Nanda Kumar means a son of Nanda. So the word Kumar, the connotation is a child, a boy. So they're called the four Kumaras because they chose never to have the physical manifestation or the physical body of a being older than 5 years old. So they always are in these bodies of 5-year-old boys, even though they, of course, eventually became many, many yugas in age. Brahma was becoming very upset as he's trying to convince his latest 4 children to get involved and take up responsibility. He just can't go running around like a child for the rest of creation. And the problem is that these 4 boys, the 4 Kumaras, they're correct. If a person would rather genuinely take up a life of devotion, a life of spiritual development, that is considered in the Vedic social structure as a legitimate reason not to then engage in worldly affairs. Of course, that comes with responsibilities, which these 4 boys were perfectly willing to accept. And the responsibility is that you have to literally go through the world by begging. You don't own land, you don't own property, you don't own wealth, you don't own anything. You go from door to beg for your meals. You don't sleep in the same place more than 3 nights in a row. So there are some responsibilities or some expectations that come with renouncing a worldly life and taking up the life of sincere spiritual activities. So these boys were perfectly fine with doing that. They were not by any means trying to game the system, as it were, to become these bogus yogis. That was not their intent. They were serious about spiritual development. So they were correct. And Lord Brahma really could not fault them. Lord Brahma is the reservoir of the Vedas. He knows that these 4 boys, the 4 Kumars, Chatushana they're called, are absolutely correct. It doesn't solve his problem. The universe needs managers, leaders, qualified managers and leaders. So Lord Brahma is trying to convince these boys, and because the boys are correct, and he can't argue with them based on Shastra, he's becoming angry. But he's trying to repress. He doesn't want to blow up. But his resentment and his frustration is growing because this is happening time and time again. He has a child, and because they're so, spiritually advanced at birth, they all go off and join the local convent, the local monastery. He's tired of this. There's work to be done. So he is becoming more and more frustrated and resentful, but he's trying to hold it in because he knows the boys are correct. But the resentment is still there because the problem that he's got is still there. He has to get this done. His anger builds within himself. And it crystallizes, if you will, in his forehead. And from there is manifest Rudra. That is how Rudra enters this particular universe. He enters as a manifestation of the frustration, the resentment, and the anger of Lord Brahma. That's how Rudra chooses to enter this particular universe. Because of that intense resentment that was repressed by Lord Brahma. He was trying to repress it. He was trying not to show it. But it was there and it was building. And Rudra was. And then the story goes on. It was Rudra expanded into 11 and so on and so forth. Anger is an energy. It is an energy from Rajaguna, the mode of passion. Rajaguna, this energy of Rajaguna, is the energy of creativity. It is from this energy of creativity that anger is born. Anger is merely the intense concentration of creative energy. That's what anger is. One of my favorite sayings about anger. Speak when you are angry, and you will give the best speech you will ever regret. Right? It will be the best speech you ever give. That's that creative nature of anger, the energy from which it comes. But because it's an intense, concentrated, misdirected manifestation of that energy, then we're obviously going to regret the consequences that come of it. But it is highly creative. That's the energy from which it comes. A nice example to understand this, and this is why anger is so destructive, right? The creative energy is fine, necessary indeed. But it comes a point where it becomes destructive. And we know Lord Shiva, Nataraj, right? Lord Shiva gives the dance of destruction at the end of the material universe. A nice example of this is hunger. When I was going to school, I went to boarding school, Gurukul, and the program was we got up very early in the morning, 5 a.m., 4:30, to go to the first Arati, the first puja of the day, which was Mangal Arati. And being young boys, we obviously sometimes did not want to get up to go to the morning program, the first Arati of the day. And we would moan and whine, oh, I'm sick, I don't want to go, I've got a headache. And one clever teacher would say, really, Maha Visnu, you're sick. Yeah, are you hungry? What healthy young boy is not hungry, right? Yes, I'm hungry. Well, then you're not sick. Right? We know appetite is actually an indicator of health. I mean, of course, you don't diagnose disease whether or not a person is hungry or not. But generally, if someone has an appetite, they are, for the most part, doing well. They're healthy or they're recovering from a sickness. The first thing we want to see is, does a person have an appetite? An appetite is a healthy state of being, to have appetite. Appetite has given rise to numerous types of cuisine. Appetites have given rise to Indian cuisine, Italian cuisine, Mexican, Latin cuisine, American cuisine, as American cuisine can be described as such. So appetite, it's a healthy state of being. Appetite is creative in nature. We will have Havan in about 15 minutes. That's the nature of appetite. That's the creative energy. However, when appetite devolves into starvation, that's when we have a problem. It's the same energy, right? Appetite is the same energy. But when that energy is not properly focused, is not properly addressed, is not properly engaged, then that energy devolves into anger and becomes destructive. So from appetite to starvation, we see from creative energy to anger. Anger is of the same creative nature, is born of the same creative energy that is Rajaguna. But when we see, as Lord Brahma tried to repress it and suppress that energy, it devolved into anger, led to destruction. The first thing, when Rudra was manifest from the anger of Lord Brahma, the first thing Rudra started to do was started to destroy the universe. The 11th Rudra was manifested, expanded into 11, And these 11 Rudras immediately started to tear apart the universe that Lord Brahma had just begun to create. So Lord Brahma had to bring them all together and say, now is not the time. At the time of pralaya, at the time of devastation, you can come out and you can destroy the universe. This is anger, krodha. To illustrate the nature of anger, I like to share a particular visual. You see, anger is not in and of itself the problem. Anger is merely an attachment revealed. Anger is the consequence of something that has gone before. Think of it this way. You have a house, a mansion, 5 bedrooms, 2 kitchens, 4.5 baths, so on and so forth. Wonderful garden space, 3-car garage. So you have this wonderful mansion. And in the basement of this mansion, the owner is keeping dynamite. Kegs of gunpowder is stored in the basement of this mansion. Spark is lit, spark goes off, the gunpowder catches, and the entire mansion is blown into the next century. This is a nice visual of anger and attachments in understanding this dynamic. Anger is the explosion, right? The mansion is our life, our existence. We have this wonderful existence, a wonderful family, a wonderful career, wonderful job, so on and so forth. And we're going on living life with great satisfaction. And then all of a sudden, something happens and we blow up. We lose it. We say something, we make a bad decision, people are hurt, we lose our job, even worse, we lose our family, whatever it may be. We drive off, hit a telephone pole because of road rage, whatever it may be, right? Resentment, frustration, we blow up, we become angry, and there is a negative consequence. Anger is that blowing up. But that blowing up, that explosion is the result of keeping dynamite in the basement in the first place. The explosion is merely a consequence. The explosion is merely an effect. So oftentimes we're trying to control anger. We're trying to control the explosion. Just like in the example of Lord Brahma, he was trying to suppress his anger. That is erroneous. The energy of anger cannot be artificially suppressed. It will manifest because it is of the energy of Raja Guna. The Raja Guna energy is creative. That means something will manifest. That is the nature of the energy. Raja Guna manifests things, creates things. Anger is born of Raja Guna. It cannot be artificially repressed. We cannot stop an explosion from taking place once the catalyst has been included in the equation. In fact, the more you try to repress an explosion, the more powerful the explosion becomes. Right? We know here in Massachusetts, fireworks are illegal. 4th of July is not around the corner, but it's coming up. Fireworks are illegal. And of course, some unfortunate person gets fireworks anyways and cause problems for themselves. But if you put a firework on the open ground, light it, and it blows up, right? There's a little burn mark on the ground. But if you take the very same firework, bind it up in some kind of container, and then light it, then you get a catastrophic effect, right? So the more we try to control and suppress the explosion that is anger, the more devastating is its effects. So it is erroneous to try to suppress artificially anger. Don't try to sit on the explosion. The problem is not the explosion. The problem is keeping dynamite in the basement of your home. The dynamite are our attachments. That's what the dynamite is. We have so many attachments. We fill the mansion of our existence. We fill our consciousness chock full of numerous attachments, and they're just sitting there. And as long as there is no catalyst, then these attachments, they sit there dormant until there's a catalyst. I am attached to being known as a black man, let's say. That's an attachment I have. I put it nice, tucked away in the basement of my consciousness. Someone comes and says, Maha Visnu, you're a moron. That's the catalyst. That's the spark that has lit the dynamite of my attachment. I blow up. In dealing with anger, do not deal with the explosion. It's too late. The explosion is the effect. What we have to train ourselves to do is to recognize the attachment. So if you go away with nothing else from this class, if you go away from nothing else, go away with this. Anger is an attachment revealed. Once we've blown up, once there has been an explosion, we can come to understand there was dynamite. There could not have been an explosion without the dynamite. There could not have been resentment, frustration, anger without an attachment. Where is that attachment? What is that attachment? So the practice is, it's almost time for puja. So the practice is, when you feel resentment, the energy, right? It's an energy, Rajaguna. When you feel the energy coming up, resentment, frustration, annoyance, it doesn't have to be full-blown anger where you're pulling your hair out and shouting invective at the person next to you. No, it doesn't have to be demonstrative. Anger can be a very, very slowly smoldering, intensely smoldering state of being. It doesn't have to be fireworks. In fact, some of the most angry people, you would never know it by their external, appearance. In fact, the people who are most demonstrative in their manifestation of anger, they are children having a temper tantrum. It's those persons who don't show their intense feelings of resentment. Those are the persons we often have to watch out for. Anyways, that's not the point. The point I'm trying to make is, when you feel the annoyance, the frustrations, the resentment beginning to build because someone has said something to you, someone has knocked over your cup of coffee, someone at the workplace, someone has done something to your computer at the workplace, someone has taken your notebook from class in college, whatever it may be. Someone's cut you off in traffic. When you feel resentment coming, pause. Remember, anger is an attachment revealed. Discard the annoyance, discard the frustration, discard the anger. Chase the attachment. Engage the attachment. What is the attachment? What am I attached to? When you engage the attachment, When you identify the attachment, guess what? Anger subsides. It's gone because your focus is dealing with the actual cause, not the effect. The cause is the attachment. The effect is secondary, is actually secondary. You deal with the cause, engage the cause. Anger will subside. Your annoyance will subside. Your consciousness will begin to become proactive because now you're investigating something that you have over which you have control. We have control over our attachments. We do not have control over the subsequent explosion. That's, at that point, it's off to the races. It's physics at work. We have control over whether or not we're storing dynamite in our basement. That's the only control that we have and that we can exercise. Now, as we begin to develop this habit, and it has to become a habit, that's where the benefit comes. When we make this a habit of when annoyance starts to arise, frustration, resentment of an issue at work, at home, in family life, wherever it may be, if this becomes a habit, then the first thing we go to is, I'm attached to something. The catalyst is irrelevant. The explosion is irrelevant. The explosion doesn't even happen just when there's the beginnings of an annoyance. Because we develop this practice, this habit, we immediately, oh, there's an attachment. And we begin to investigate, is my attachment? Now, an attachment may be I'm attached to not being hit over the head with a hammer. That's an attachment we should all have, right? But by engaging the attachment, you can then choose anger as an option. That's the difference. Rather than being at the mercy of an explosion because we haven't identified the attachment. A catalyst comes, the dynamite, the attachment blows up. At that point, we're along for the ride. But if we engage this habit, develop this habit of identifying our attachments, that puts us in the driving seat, that puts us in a frame of consciousness where we can then choose what we want to do. Anger is no longer a reaction to something. Anger is not an explosive reaction to a catalyst. It's not an explosive reaction to our attachments. Anger then becomes an option, a tool we use to achieve something of worthy consequence. Anger becomes a tool. Anger becomes an option. Being hit over the head or allowing someone to hit others over the head should not be allowed to carry on. I will choose anger to immediately stop this situation. So anger becomes a tool that we can skillfully use to achieve something of actual value, of benefit to ourselves and all involved. But we can only use anger, we can only choose anger as an option if we have engaged our attachments in the first place. If we do not know our attachments, then anger is a result of our attachments being ignited. There's no control at that point. Anger is not an option. It's the result. It's not an option. It's no longer a tool. Whatever happens, it's up to the laws of physics at that point. So we'll end here. If you take nothing else from this, anger is an attachment revealed. Leave anger alone. Do not try to repress it or suppress it. The more you try to repress it, the more powerful it gets. Because anger is energy born of Raja Guna. Rajaguna is a creative energy. Something is going to come of it. Later, misdirected on, we misdirect our anger on someone else, become passive aggressive, but it will manifest. We know this from the story of Lord Brahma. We know this from personal experience. Do not repress anger. Let it be. Change your focus and find that attachment. Engage that attachment that puts our consciousness in a completely different mindset. And then that gives us to transform what was uncontrolled anger and resentment to something that we can use as a tool. Energy, creative energy, we can use as a tool. We can choose as an option to achieve something of benefit in our life and in the world. Hari Hari.